My name is Emily Carter, and on most days, my world feels like it's made of glass and steel. From the 42nd floor of my office in downtown Chicago, I can see the river slicing through the city, glinting under the late morning sun. The air hums with quiet confidence, the kind you can't fake. My silk blouse whispers against my skin as I move, heels clicking softly on the marble floor. I'm reviewing a contract when my phone buzzes. The name flashing on the screen is one I haven't seen in years. Daniel Carter, my older brother. For a moment, my hand stills. The last time we spoke, his voice was colder than the January wind outside this building. And now, after all this time, he's calling me? I let it ring twice before I answer, my tone calm, measured. Emily, he says, his voice carrying something I've never heard from him before, hesitation. Hey, we need to talk. It's about the business. The business. The one they pushed me out of. The one I bled for. The one that taught me the most important lesson of my life. Sometimes family loyalty has an expiration date. I lean back in my chair, letting the skyline fill my view. My pulse is steady, but inside, memories I've buried start to stir. If he's calling me now, it can only mean one thing. They need me. And they have no idea what I've back 5 years ago. I was 26, running on caffeine and blind loyalty. The Carter and Sons Supply Company had been in our family for 3 generations, and I believed my place there was as permanent as the brick building we operated out of on West Monroe Street. I'd grown up stocking shelves after school, running invoices during college breaks, and eventually managing client accounts. I knew the business better than anyone, but in the Carter family, my last name wasn't enough. Not the way it was for my brothers. That day, the boardroom smelled faintly of stale coffee and the cologne my father wore, sharp and heavy, like it was trying to cover something. My brother Daniel sat across from me, sleeves rolled up, expression unreadable. My father's gaze was fixed on a stack of papers he didn't bother offering me. Emily, he began, not looking up, we've decided to restructure. Your role will no longer be necessary. I remember my fingers tightening around my pen until it nearly snapped. You're firing me? My voice cracked, and I hated that it did. Daniel cleared his throat. It's not personal. We just think it's better if you explore other opportunities. Not personal. It was entirely personal. The lump in my throat burned as I forced myself to stand. My chair scraped against the floor. The sound felt louder than my heartbeat. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I walked out. On my way, I passed Grandma Ruth's photo on the hallway wall. She'd been the only one who ever told me I could be more than the daughter who helps out. I could almost hear her voice in my head. They can take the job, Emmy, but they can't take your mind. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed in my tiny apartment, staring at the small leather notebook Grandma had given me years ago. On the first page, in her delicate handwriting, she'd written, "Your ideas are worth more than gold. Don't you dare give them away to someone who doesn't value them." I didn't know it then, but that sentence would become the blueprint for everything I was about to build. I closed the notebook, wiped my eyes, and made a silent promise to myself. I would never again let anyone, family. I started small. And when I say small, I mean a 200-square-foot office above a dry cleaner on the south side of Chicago. The smell of pressed shirts and starch seeped through the vents, and the hum of the steam press downstairs became my background music. My desk was a second-hand find from Craigslist, my laptop a 6-year-old MacBook with a crack in the corner of the screen. The first few months were brutal. I'd leave my office long after the sun had set, walking to my car with a knot in my stomach and only $42 left in my checking account. Some nights, I'd sit in my car and cry before even turning the ignition. But I had something Carter and Sons never gave me, freedom. I could make my own calls, chase my own ideas, and answer to no one but myself. I decided to focus on supplying niche eco-friendly packaging to small food businesses, something our family company had always dismissed as too small to bother with. It was a gap in the market, and I intended to fill it. That's when Margaret Lee came into my life. She owned a boutique coffee chain and had a reputation for being both intimidating and fiercely loyal once you earned her trust. She became my first major client and my unofficial mentor. "You've got grit," she told me over coffee one morning, pushing a folder of vendor contacts across the table. But grit's only half the game. Learn the numbers. Master the supply chain. Then they can't touch you. I listened. I learned. I worked. Days blurred into nights, and my world became a cycle of cold calls, supplier meetings, packaging samples, and invoices. Slowly, wins began to stack up. First win, landing my second big client, a chain of organic bakeries. Second win, finally being able to pay myself a modest salary without touching my savings. Third win, getting my first real office, an airy space with windows that actually opened, in a neighborhood where the only smell was fresh coffee from the cafe downstairs. Still, I kept my success under wraps. My social media showed nothing but vague updates, keeping busy, or working on new projects. No one in my family knew how well things were going, and I preferred it that way. By the end of my third year, my company, EcoSource Packaging, was supplying to over 100 businesses across 3 states. Revenue had crossed 7 figures. And still not a word to the Carters. It wasn't about hiding forever. It was about waiting. Because I knew, deep down, there would come a day when they'd look over their shoulder and see me standing there. The call from Daniel came 2 days later. "Emily," he said, "Dad and we'd like to meet. In person." His tone was polite, almost deferential, a language he'd never spoken to me before. We agreed to meet at my office. I didn't offer details, just an address. The morning of their visit, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my 12th floor headquarters in Chicago's West Loop, watching delivery trucks unload pallets of recycled paper and plant-based containers. The air smelled faintly of cedar from the new shelving in the lobby. Behind me, the hum of my staff's conversations mixed with the rhythmic clicking of keyboards. When the elevator doors slid open, Daniel stepped out first, wearing the same navy suit he'd worn to my firing. My father followed, his expression carved from stone. They both stopped short. The reception area was all warm oak and glass, dotted with lush green plants. On one wall, a sleek brass plaque REA. Daniel's eyes scanned the space, the awards lining the shelf, the framed magazine covers, the signed deals with national brands. My father's jaw tightened, but his gaze lingered a beat too long on the photograph of me and Margaret Lee at our first trade show. I walked toward them, heels silent on the polished wood floor. "Welcome," I said evenly. "Can I get you coffee? We have an in-house cafe, organic beans, compostable cups. You know, the kind of thing the old company never bothered with." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Emily, the truth is, Carter and Sons is in trouble. We've lost some major accounts. The industry's shifting and your biggest competitor seems to be ahead of the curve." I finished for him. Silence. They followed me into the conference room, where sunlight poured across a massive reclaimed wood table. On the far wall, a live digital dashboard displayed our client list, order volumes, and expansion map, 3 states lit up in green, 2 more in negotiation. My father finally spoke. "We didn't know you'd built all this." "That's because you never asked," I replied, folding my hands on the table. "You assumed I'd disappear. I didn't. I built something better. And now, yes, I'm your biggest competitor." Daniel swallowed hard. "We need your help." The words hung in the air like a confession. I leaned back in my chair, letting them take in every inch of the room, the details that told the story they'd ignored, the personalized client thank you notes, the industry awards, the innovation patents framed on the wall. For years, I'd imagined this moment, not to gloat, but to stand here fully in my own power. And it was better than I'd ever pictured. "What exactly are you asking for?" I said finally. "A partnership," Daniel said. "A merger. Something to keep both companies alive." I studied them for a long moment. My father's hands were clasped tightly, his knuckles pale. Daniel couldn't meet my eyes. Inside, the girl they fired wanted to say no without hesitation. But the woman I'd become knew there was more to gain by listening. "All right," I said. "We'll discuss terms." "My terms." I let the silence stretch until the tension was almost visible between us. They were here because they had no other choice, and for the first time in my life, I could set the rules. My terms are simple. I began, my voice steady. If we work together, it will be on equal footing. No hidden deals, no last-minute changes, and no boardroom decisions made behind closed doors. Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. I'm not finished. I stood and walked to the wall where my grandmother's leather notebook sat in a shadow box frame. I tapped the glass lightly. This, I said, is where my company began, and it's going to guide what happens next. I turned back to them. Condition 1, women in leadership roles, not just token positions. That means hiring, promoting, and paying them fairly. If I see the same boys' club behavior I left behind, the deal ends. Daniel shifted in his chair, but he didn't argue. Condition 2, we adopt sustainable practices across the board. Eco-friendly packaging, waste reduction, renewable suppliers. No more shrugging it off as a trend. My father's brows knit together. That's expensive. So is failure, I replied smoothly. Condition 3, transparency. Every major financial decision is disclosed to all partners. No family-only side meetings. No favoritism. I walked back to my seat, letting my heels click against the wood, each step a reminder of the ground I'd claimed for myself. And finally, condition 4, respect. You'll treat me as an equal partner, not as the kid sister who used to fetch coffee. If that's a problem, we can end this meeting right now. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Daniel glanced at our father, whose jaw was tight but not defiant. You've changed, my father said finally. No, I corrected him. I stopped asking for permission to be who I already was. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the HVAC. Daniel nodded slowly. If we agree, will you help us? I'll help us, I said. But you'll have to earn it. Every single day. It wasn't revenge. It was something better, balance. They could either meet me on this new ground or watch from the sidelines as I kept building without them. The months that followed felt like walking on a bridge that was still under construction, cautious, deliberate, but with the promise of something stronger ahead. To my surprise, Daniel kept his word. Within weeks, I saw changes in their company. Women were promoted into real decision-making positions, not just given shiny titles with no authority. They began phasing out wasteful packaging, signing contracts with renewable suppliers, some of them the very vendors I had introduced. My father was slower to adjust. He still spoke more in boardroom monologues than in conversations, but there were small cracks in the armor. Once, after a quarterly review, he lingered as everyone else left the room. You were right, he said quietly, almost like the words were foreign on his tongue. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The partnership wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And in the quiet moments, I found myself looking back, tracing the path from that cold boardroom where they'd fired me to this sunlit office where my name hung in brass on the wall. One rainy Thursday afternoon, I took down my grandmother's leather notebook from its frame. The cover was worn, the pages still carrying her faint lavender scent. I ran my fingers over the first page, her handwriting looping elegantly. Your ideas are worth more than gold. Don't you dare give them away to someone who doesn't value them. She'd been right. The girl who walked out with nothing had built something unshakable, not just a company, but a life where her value was no longer up for debate. As I placed the notebook back on the shelf, I caught my reflection in the glass. There was a steadiness in my eyes that hadn't been there before. I smiled, a quiet smile meant for me alone, and thought, they fired me from the family business, and I became the competition they never saw coming. Fade to black.